Hi, my name is Phil. Last night, the Cambridge Communists hosted Steve Marsling, a London recruit. We cover a broad range of ages in our branch. So for some, opposition to apartheid is just kind of in the history books from school. But for others, along with the Vietnam War, it's the stuff that made our lives. What is apartheid? Apartheid means separate development or segregation, and it was a forced, oppressive, class-based, institutionalized racial segregation that kept black, coloured and white people apart, so that the white ruling class and those who were allied to it could enjoy great riches amidst tremendous poverty and distress of ordinary working people. The struggle against apartheid took many forms and was actually on a world scale. It gripped the headlines every day when I came back from school around the mid-70s. The struggle was about boycotts. There was a boycott on a world scale. There was the burning of passes. There was organised mass action. There was making local councils ungovernable. The working class, the industrial working class of South Africa in big factories led mass strikes and created a magnificent trade union centre, COSATU. And this was allied to the campaigning of the United Democratic Front, of students, and the armed struggle led by Umkhonto we Sizwe. At a low point in the 1970s, the liberation movement turned to its friends in Britain and in other countries abroad and said, we need help to keep the flame of our struggle alive. And so it came about that a number of young communists, some Labour and other party members, volunteered to take part in clandestine propaganda activity inside the country. They were very brave, and they knew that there was a big penalty to pay if they were caught. Steve Marsling lives local to us. He's in East Anglia, and we were really proud to be able to welcome Steve to speak to us. So we filmed it. This is his story, and we commend it to you. Steve, over to you.
Right, well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to your meeting. I'm really touched. It's a great honour for me. I'll start by talking about a little bit about how we got involved. I joined the Young Communist League in 1969, I think it was. It was quite a funny experience. I got into this pub around the Oval Station, and I got talking to this bloke at the, ordered a pint, it was a hot day. And he said, there's a folk club up above. Do you fancy coming? And I hate folk music. I mean, it's just, I don't mind socialism, but if it indulges in folk music, I've always been a soul and jazz man. But I said, all right, mate, because he'd said to me, but he said, it is run by the Young Communist League. I said, well, I'm not prejudiced, I'll go up and have a look. So, I listened to the speeches, put my earplugs in when they had the music on, and I started chatting to them, and he said, why don't you come to one of our meetings? So I'd always been, on the left, but only vaguely, and I had loads of questions, and they were answered intelligently by someone I know Phil knows, Bob Allen, who was full-time secretary. And anyway, I decided that, the Young Communist League was for me, and I attended all the meetings. I spoke on soapboxes outside Brixton Market, where me uncle had a stall. What are you doing here, he said. I said, I'm speaking for communism. Oh, good on you, mate. And just carried on selling oranges. But it was a good time. And I said, Bob Allen once approached me and he said, I think I've got a little job for you. So I said, well, what's that then, Bob? He said, well, I want you to meet someone. And what you have to remember, comrades, the two major internationalist issues that communists were involved in was opposition, well, not just opposition to the Vietnam War, but actually victory for the Vietnamese people. You know, we weren't liberals about it, and also opposing the apartheid system. I presume everybody knows what apartheid was. I mean, it was a minority government set up by Britain in 1910 in the Union of Southern Africa, and then extended in 1948 when the Nationalist Party came to power. You weren't allowed to meet someone of a different colour. That was illegal, so any sexual relations you had was illegal unless you stayed with the same people. You had, you know, apartheid ran through the whole system, economically, socially, and mentally. And it was a system that suited the capitalist class. And we were there to try and eradicate it. Now, I'm going back to 1971 now, when we went there. The apartheid regime thought that apartheid was going to last for 1,000 years. They had jailed or murdered African National Congress and South African Communist Party members, and they said, your organisation is finished. And to some extent, that was true. But the exiled South Africans who had managed to escape, this was after the Sharpeville massacre, managed to escape, organised in London, and they said, well, we need to get across to the vast majority of the African people that we're still around. We still exist and we ain't going anywhere. But in order to do that, with the internal organisation smashed, they had to recruit young, white, working class people to go into South Africa and to do a variety of propaganda exercises. So that was how we, the Young Communist League, about 75% of the people that went to South Africa as recruits were members of the Young Communist League at some time. There were other people that were recruited from the London School of Economics, but mainly they were communists. And they were recruited by the Communist Party. And there was an appointed person, you know, who would ask trusted comrades if they could go to South Africa. The first thing we were told by a man called Ronnie Kasrils, who was a great South African communist and an inspiration to communists all over the world, and he was our handler. And the first thing he told us was the minimum, if you were caught, the absolute minimum would be 5 years imprisonment, and 5 years meant 5 years under the Suppression of Communism Act. You would also be tortured, you would be beaten badly because you would be in solitary confinement before you came to trial. And then when you came to trial, you would be, you know, it would be a show trial. You would be guilty. There's no question, unless you denounced socialism and you said you thought apartheid was a good thing, and then they might let you go home. So we knew some of the risk we were taking, and what we had to do was, on the anniversary of the Sharpeville massacre, we had to go fly from Heathrow with a false bottom suitcase which had explosives in it and leaflets, because what we were going to do, as well as doing a few clandestine other things, was to let off leaflet bombs. And leaflet bombs would explode right up in the air. We put them near railway stations, you put them near post offices as the African working class were going back to their townships, and they would run and collect these, and you know, before the South African police had a chance to whack them. And that was the idea, the general idea of what we would try to do. We would put we had a bit of leeway about what the bombs were. So that was our task, to try and do this and to carry it out successfully. I must say, nobody knew anybody else. So, I mean, as it happened, in our situation, there were 5 groups of London recruits, all letting off these leaflet bombs at the same time. Our target was Cape Town, but what we didn't know was there's others, because if you know too much and you do get tortured, you can actually spill the beans. But if you know nothing, then you'll go into you can profess ignorance. So the day came, and I was just an ordinary working class geezer. I'd never been on a plane before. I'd never been, the furthest I've ever been abroad, furthest I've been was a few Millwall away games, and that was only to Brighton and back. I mean, so to suddenly ask me to fly all that way, well, it was exciting. It was exciting, but scary. And I went with a comrade that I'm sure some of you know. I chose him. They said they wanted 2 of you, and I chose Sean Hosey, a young Irish lad who had come over to England when he was 10, when his father was a shop steward at the Jaguar plant in Coventry. And he would come to London, and I decided he was, he would be the best person to go for. So we arrived in South Africa, in Cape Town, and nothing surprises you. Nothing. You can't describe what it's like seeing the kind of poverty that we saw on the way from the airport to the town. It was absolutely shocking. I mean, and the signs. It's one thing to say, but when you start seeing signs saying blanc, non blanc, when you start, having to check whether you can go on the right bus or not, it really does hit you home how undignified and hurtful it must be on an hourly basis for the 90% majority of the people that were imprisoned in that apartheid regime. So our job was to be tourists, which again was very hard for both me and Sean, who were internationalists, anti-racist, and we had to be racists. We had to be racist for the cause. We had to go to horse racing, we had to go, to white-only bars and listen to their drivel. And that was part of it, because we couldn't show who we were or what our hand was. And so, to be honest, I think that both of us couldn't wait till the day came, the allotted day came, when we were going to let off these bombs to get our own back, because we were angry. When the actual day came, Cape Town in August is wet. It's wet and horrible. So we got the idea of having these big long Macs down to our toes, and the leaflet bombs, and we'd learn how to, learn this backwards, how to do them, how to make them. Basically, it's a mixture of gunpowder, put on a little plinth and that sort of thing, and you have a fuse. Those of you who are old enough, it's probably only Phil now, but those of you who are old enough might remember these little devices you could get if you were in a car parking meter, and you could get them and you could put sort of an hour on or 20 minutes or something like that, and it would tell you when you had to go back and put some more money in. Well, that was our timers. They'd been invented or disguised by a man, a South African man called Ron Press, who was over in Bristol. He was the ANC scientific officer. So we got these devices, but one of them was a bit dodgy. But anyway, we thought we'd go ahead. Well, on the day, it was blazing sunshine. So you've got 2 idiots with Macs and buckets, because we had hidden buckets, walking around Cape Town on a bright summer's day. I mean, talk about sticking out like a couple of Alicia Beacons, but we got lucky. The apartheid police were waiting for us because they'd got wind, so they said, that something big was going to happen. So we got down there, we laid one by the railway station, one in this big town square where they had to cross, one outside their Houses of Parliament, just outside their Houses of Parliament, which we weren't meant to do, but we did, and a couple of others, one on a bus station. When it came to the third one, I've planted it and laid it down. It was, unbeknown to me, the one with the dodgy timer. And as I've set it for 20 minutes, the bloody thing's gone off, isn't it? Now, I don't know if you can see my fingernails, but I was lucky. I had long ones then. And I've managed to jam my hand in between the detonator and the switch and push it round again. I looked at Sean, he's as white as a sheet, absolutely white as a sheet. And I'm shaking like this because I'd have been the one-armed socialist, or at least I've been badly burnt. And I just let it go. And I said, look, I said, Sean, if this don't work, I'm off. And he said, I am too. We'll take our chances. Anyway, it stayed. Wow, that's like the sweat off, you know, and carried on. Well, all 5 bombs went off. Absolutely bad, you know, and there was pandemonium. I mean, we'd had to go back, but Sean doubled back and had a little peep. And you know, the Africans were cheering and jumping for joy because it said, we're still here. You're not been forgotten. The ANC is alive. The ANC will build again. I mean, it was fantastic to see this celebrations. So that was tremendous. And the next day, all front pages of every newspaper was about what we'd achieved and what the others in Joburg and Durban had achieved as well. It had been a tremendous success from our point of view, a disaster for the apartheid forces. And then we made our way home, which wasn't without danger because we got the wrong tickets. So we had to kick our heels in what was then Rhodesia. And it was front page news on the Rhodesian papers as well. But we got home. So that was terrific. And we were congratulated when we got back. And then they said, you know, you up for doing it again? And we said, yeah, we're up, you know, if we can. So about 6 months later, I got a phone call. I've got an urgent job for you. Now, at that time, I just started in a teacher's training college. I was just about to do my first teaching practice. So I thought, bloody hell, I'm not going to explain this away. And then I spoke to Sean. He said, I'll do it. He said, I've got loads of leave. He worked for Granada TV. I've got loads of leave. I'll go. So I said, would you? Because I said, you know, it's going to be really difficult for me. He said, no, I'd love to. He said, it's just straightforward. All I've got to do is hand over some false passes and some money. And it's in East London and it'll be hot, you know, beautiful. So I'll have a little holiday. So I said, well, if that's okay. And everyone agreed that was okay, Sean would go. What we didn't know was it was a trap, that people had broken down under torture and had found and given away the code and given away details. So Sean was walking into a trap. He was there and had a nice time for a few days, and then went to his rendezvous and handed over the monies, the false monies and the false passports, etc. And then he got a hand on his shoulder and about 5 guns pointing at him, I think. And he was taken away. Now, there was always ways where we would communicate through you know, having a nice time, and that meant it went okay, through a postcard, an urgent postcard. And neither me or Ronnie Caswell's got those postcards, so we were worried. Ronnie, with his experience, said the first thing you need to do, Steve, are you friendly with Sean's landlady in Holloway Road? I said, yeah, of course I am, yeah, you know, I know her quite well. He said, well, you need to go in there and clear his place out, because what the South African secret police, the boss, as they're called, Bureau of State Security. They'll pose a student friend of his, and they'll go in to try and find evidence that they can they can get to prove his guilt. So we did that. We got the people out. We got all the evidence out that might be there, and we told his landlady, don't let anybody in that says they're Sean's friends. And sure enough, a few days later, they did turn up and they tried to get into Sean's lodgings, but she sent them away. So that was down to Ronnie Casrell's being very astute as to what they might do. But I don't know who tapped my phone. Either there was some kind of tacit thing with MI5, but it was tapped, and I was followed because they'd found out that I was in on the first meeting. What was happening to Sean was he was being tortured. He'd got himself sunburned, and they were constantly rubbing their heels on his sunburn. They were banging his head. He now wears glasses against walls and that, but he held out for as long as he could. And I can tell you now, he was offered the opportunity to denounce communism and socialism before his trial, and that he would go free. So much for a proper trial. That's all he had to do in front of the cameras. And he told them to fuck off, you know, and brave man. He served, I think it was nearly a year in solitary confinement, and then 5 years, which he had to do every day of in Pretoria prison, where he was ensconced in there. So that's my part of the story. Other things that happened, we set up, or I didn't set up, but the recruits set up fake safari tours where arms and various other things were smuggled in. Unbeknown to the tourists who were on top, there were false bottoms of the tourists. There was ships that went in, and certain people on the steward side were there, and they delivered and distributed leaflets and secret information and things like that. Loudspeakers were set up denouncing apartheid and saying that the ANC was there. And this went on till, you know, the large part of it went on to about 1975. Why did it stop? Well, because the ANC and the South African Communist Party became stronger internally. They no longer needed white recruits to go over there. Why white recruits? Well, of course, because we could move around how we wanted. That was the reason why. That was no longer needed, because the internal struggle was getting bigger and stronger, and the SACP had reorganised itself in every area of Southern Africa, including Zimbabwe and Angola and Mozambique and Namibia, and we're helping each person there. So what we're trying to do now, the film, the book you've seen, that is one of the best sellers for a while of socialist books. It's all monies and proceeds go to the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund. We don't get a penny of that, and we won't get nothing from the film either. The film is 95% complete. There's just the last bit, and it will be completed by October or beginning of November this year, the whole thing. The whole cutting, it's just at the cutting stage now. There's no more filming to do. I'm told by people that have seen reruns of it, it's one of the most exciting films going. It's a docudrama. They've got people playing me, as well as me in it, as me per arm, as people playing me, and it isn't Daffy Duck. It's someone far more handsome than I could ever hope for. And you know, it's going to be a massive thing. And this is down to what the YCL was and is now. I mean, it's a revolutionary organisation, and it gets involved where other people, you know, might just theorise. We've also want to get a teaching pack in schools that talks about the recruits, the history of apartheid, and the fact that, you know, there is a struggle against racism that was going back and going back for a long, long time, and that I am really proud to have been part of that. I'm really proud because, quite honestly, the best day of my life was when I, as a real thicko who had done nothing in school, I'd been recruited to the YCL, because after that I got O-levels, I got things, and so, you know, that was never on the cards for me. So I owe your party a great deal of thanks, and maybe I repaid it somewhat. Tina